Welcome to the M1 podcast, set up to provide features and stories up and down and in and around the M1. Relax and listen. If you enjoy, please share and like. Olga Popova and her husband moved to Ireland in 2021. They settled in Santry in Dublin, at the bottom of the M1. Her husband had been involved in activities protesting against the Russian government, and after a short stay in police custody, they decided it was time to flee. Olga now has her own business in Ireland and is coordinator of Free Russians Ireland. She has her TikTok profile with over 50,000 followers, and in this podcast, we discuss her perspective on the conflict with Ukraine. Olga, you live in Santry, and if the M1 was a river, then Santry would be its source. But Santry is at the source of the M1, which is a motorway. So you're living in Ireland about 3 years, and Santry is close to the airport. What led you to choose to live there? Is it just that was the first place near the airport, and how's it going for you?
No. First of all, yes, when I came to Ireland, it was a COVID time, and I've spent my first 10 days in Santry in a Holiday Inn hotel on a quarantine. So military sent me to the hotel. So my first 10 days in Ireland was in Santry. Then I had for 1 year an apartment in a city center. And then I decided that it is time to move to Santry again.
Okay. So you moved back to Santry then?
Yeah, I moved back to Santry because I really like this area. Lots of trees, lots of nature. Yeah, it is an amazing place.
Yes, it's got a lot going for it. There's things that are close by in itself, and the nice trees, the parks, but it's close to the airport and it's close to the city centre as well.
Yeah, I think that it is the best place in Dublin for me personally. So, of course, everybody has their favorite place, but for me, it is Santry, definitely.
And you moved directly from Russia. You were living in Moscow. What led you to leave there?
That was a quite pretty interesting story. I had 2 businesses there, and my husband had a really good career. So we was kind of rich there. So there were 0 economic reasons to move anywhere. But my husband took part in protests since 2011. So every year, several times, there were protests in Russia. Maybe you will be surprised to hear it, but in reality, it was quite irregular. And especially it became regular in the last years, 2019, 2020, 2021. So it was many protests there, and my husband took part on every of them. And he was really lucky, and he never were seized by police until 2020. And that was a protest against constitution, a new constitution, which allowed Putin to be a president up to 2036. And when this constitution became real, there were protests. My husband was there, and then he came to jail for a very short period of 1 night. He was really lucky because he can spend there from 1 night to 2 years for protesting. So you never know. And after that, he said that we will definitely move because he will never come back to jail. He can't do it, and he can't keep silent. So he said that
he went on protests. He spent a night in jail, were you going on the protests as well?
No. I wasn't. I have never done this, because if you take part in the protest in Russia, you should really be fast to run away from the police. I am not strong enough to run from the police, and
Oh, wow.
yes, and so in Russia he took part in a protest, and I stay home with our child. And when he spent the night in police, I was really glad that I sit with my child, so somebody take care of her. So,
And so,
yeah.
when did you leave Russia?
In 2021. So he was in jail in 2020, and it took some time to find a job, to get a visa, so all this stuff. So in 2021, we came here. And
to Ireland.
Yeah.
And you have since established a business.
Yeah.
And you're also coordinator of Free Russians Ireland. And
Yes.
that's how I met you. You organised some activities and protests in Dublin.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about this group, Free Russians Ireland?
So that group was formed since the very first day of the war in Ukraine. So we was protesting at 9 a.m. of the first day of war, besides the Russian embassy. And since then, we organize protests from time to time, regularly. So on some big dates or when something happens. So it is regular protests we are doing. The second thing, we are writing letters to political prisoners in Russia. And also we try to speak with some media when it's possible, but and with some politicians when it's possible. And also we collaborate with other organizations all around the world. So, and when we organize something, we organize it together on the same date, to make a union protest all together. So that's,
yes, It's interesting that you've been able to form this group. And I remember meeting you on your protest on O'Connell Street, because I've also attended some of the protests outside the Russian embassy organised by Ukrainians, and then in the city centre and so on. And I can imagine it's probably difficult for you and Russians to, would you bring a banner, or would you or you just come as individuals to those protests, or what's the because it's a war between one country and another, and I can imagine some people will have prejudices against each other.
Yeah. Right now, our strategy is to organize a separate protest. So we, even when it is the day of the anniversary of war, so 1 year of war, 2nd year of war, so we organize protests in different times. So at least they are at 12 o'clock, we are at 2 o'clock. So
yes,
we do it separately. We speak with Ukrainians who organize protests to settle it up. And when we spoke with each other, they told us that we can come to their protests, but as individuals. So no flags, no any recognitions that we are from Russia, so nothing. We can come, but nobody should see that we are from there. So
yes,
I know that some people are joining Ukrainian protests as well, but yeah.
All that's understandable. On the other hand, I've heard people wonder during the course of this war is if only the Russians would protest and so on, and then they haven't seen evidence of Russians protesting internationally. But your group is quite active, and you're prepared to protest in Dublin, and you have done activities at the embassy and in the city centre and elsewhere.
Yeah, so mostly we organize our protests in the city center for many reasons. First of all, I personally believe that it is more visible and it can bring more effect, And second, if Russian embassy is quite a dangerous place for Russian citizens. So if you are Russian citizens and you are protesting in front of the Russian embassy, you can be sentenced in Russia for that, because this is a special article that this is a discreditation of the official buildings of Russia. So yes. It is kind of so to reduce any to prevent any problems to my people. I try to save them from any kind of problems inside country, because many of them come back from time to time to see their old relatives. So they need sometimes to come back, some of them. And
can it be difficult for relatives in terms of activities that Russian people engage with here? Their relatives at home, they can be intimidated maybe?
It could be, it could, so they can't be detained. But what can Russian police do? They can come even every day to their house and, just check for evidence. So it will be legal. So they can make your parents or your relatives to feel quite uncomfortable. So they can come to their flat every day if they want, and check and grab the stuff. And, to grab one of the things that Russian police are doing, they grab all the electronic in your house, laptop, phones, everything you have, and say, this is an evidence. We need to check it. And you will never get it back. Never. Yeah. This is kind of stuff they can do,
And you said about one of the activities your group is involved with is writing letters to political prisoners in Russia. And when you describe that activity of writing letters, it reminds me of the work Amnesty International was originally set up to do. How many political prisoners are there roughly in Russia? Do we know at this stage?
We can say that. So we have reports from the special organization over the info. So they are reporting how many people were detained for the political protests in the recent. And so last 6 months, it was 1,000. In the 2023, it was like 19,000. So it is thousands. So not hundreds, it is thousands.
Several thousands.
Yeah. And so, yes, lots of people.
And with your group, do you have a website or a way that people can contact you?
We have Facebook and Instagram page, and
what's the name of the Facebook page and Instagram page?
Free Russians Ireland. You can.
Okay, there you go. It's very searchable. And
very searchable.
Interestingly, in terms of social media, and not Facebook and Instagram, but TikTok, you have a presence on TikTok, quite a profound presence. You've acquired in 3 years more than 50,000 followers on TikTok. Your content is mostly, is it all in the English language? And people can find you at Olianiko. I'll put that in the article on the m1.radio.ie link. But you share a wide range of insights into Russian knowledge, culture, and also current topical issues. So one of those posts that had a lot of views was your post, "I love Russia, and that's why I want Russia to lose this war." Can you tell me about writing that post or making that video on TikTok?
Yeah, that is quite an interesting point of view, because many people who are supporting Putin, they don't support Putin because they love war, but they support him because they say, this is my country. How can I not to support, my country? And my point of view that I still love my country. And I just think that interest of the people is opposite that interest of the government. So government want to win in this war, but during the whole history of Russia, Russian people were benefiting when Russia lost the war. So when Russia won Napoleon War or won in the Second World War, Russian citizens got nothing but repressions. But when Russia lost at Crimea or with Japan, or so in
or
those
Afghanistan.
points, or Afghanistan, on those points, government become a bit weaker, and people got some freedom. So after the Crimea, 90% of Russian population was kind of slaves because they was крепостной. So they were connected to the land, and they were kind of property with the land. So land and people were a property of a very small group, like a lords in country. And that was even in the middle of the 19th century. But when Russia lost the Crimea War, then many reforms came out and people got freedom after
That's interesting. It's interesting that you make that connection between defeat and victory in war and the levels of freedom that people have had. I've never heard that description, that connection being made before, because my understanding, say, Russian history is, serfdom ended kind of in the 19th century at some stage, and the Tsar was overthrown in 1917, etc., etc. But you're making that connection between winning war leads to repression and a stronger dictatorship, and losing war has led to more freedom.
Yeah, and even after Napoleon War, many of Russian people, they came back because they, of course, when they fight Napoleon, they saw the Europe, and they, speak with some people in Europe, and they got some ideas about constitution and, all this stuff. And then after very few years of the Napoleon War, they had a first rebellion with demand on constitution, and all of them were sent to Siberia. So, so they didn't get the constitution as a result. So.
It's often reported that when there's comment about the Russian-Ukrainian war currently, that most Russians are supportive of Putin and the war. Is that true?
I will. When somebody tells me this, I am really, I don't know what to do, to cry or to what to do, because right now, since the beginning of the war, 95% of Russians are refusing to speak with sociologists. So sociologists. And even there were some guys who were detained after they answered to sociologists. So they were detained for their answer. There were one or two such evidence. So after that, and of course, this information was in a newspaper, on Telegram, so everywhere. So people know that if they are answering wrong, they can be detained or something can happen with them. So as a result, if they don't support Putin war, they just don't speak with sociologists. Yes. So when you hear 80% Russians something, remember, this is 5% who are speaking with sociology, so they are not afraid. So they are support, so they are not afraid. And 95%, you will never know what they are thinking about.
So when people get a phone call from some survey company saying, hello, I'm doing a survey to ask people about their political attitudes, if they fully agree with the government, they might say, yeah, okay, go ahead. And if they don't, then they say, I'm busy now, or I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. So all sociology after 2022 is totally, so I don't know why they are still publishing this, because this is not a sociology anymore, you know.
They talk about surveys, and you're saying that these surveys are meaningless. I suppose talking to you, it's kind of interesting because this conflict is going on 2.5 years and hundreds of thousands have been killed. What is going on in cities and towns, like people that you know with their attitudes? What are they saying about the situation? Or like tens, possibly hundreds of thousands killed and wounded. Has that changed the attitudes of ordinary people who've either participated in the conflict or people in their hometowns? We know that participation in war was incentivized by big levels of money, but there must be different attitudes shifting as well.
Yeah. I can say that this is a situation quite different that we had when it was a war in Afghanistan. Because even when I was a child, the war in Afghanistan were already complete, you know, but I still remember the songs about Afghanistan that, you know, people are singing the song, people are telling the stories. So it was like a pain in a nation. But what I can see right now, so because young guys who never choose to come to Afghanistan came there, you know. And right now, what I can see that Russian government tried to prevent such an expression. So they've made a mobilization, and 300,000 people came to war in the result of mobilization, but that was a shock for the society. And, you know, people are, when there is some protest against the war, it is women who are mothers and who are wives of those 300,000 who were mobilized. So they are very active, and they say, please come we want our husbands back. So these women are really, really, really active. But many of participants of this war were never mobilized. So they were a kind of people who signed this contract by their own free will. And nobody, so many of people come there because of money, and nobody is protesting with them about them. No wives, nobody, because it was their choice, you know. Yes. And they've made this choice, and society really doesn't care about this. Really, nobody cares about this. Even media who are, you know, kind of democracy media who are outside the Russia, they never speak about these people. They speak only about people who were mobilized because, you know, they never choose. So they're kind of victims in this situation. But so society really doesn't feel sorry for these people. And this is kind of fair. So people say they just gave, made their choice. It was their choice.
Anyone who's participated in the war, if they're being killed, ordinary Russians don't really care about them because they volunteered.
Yes, they volunteered. They took lots of money. So for Russia, what money they are offering for the army right now, so this is kind of crazy level. So you've sold your soul for this money. This is your choice. This is not my problem. This is kind of people are
At the start of the war, the expectation was that it would take 3 days to a week. And now we're nearly 3 years into the war and many casualties. What do you think will happen?
Right now, so I was in Russia, so I came back every year, at least. I try to come back every half a year to have a look what's going on inside, of course, to meet my relatives, friends, everybody. I really miss home, and if there is no war, I definitely came back, for them. But right now, so what I can say that when you read some news about Russia, you feel that, oh, this is something really dangerous going on there. But when you come there, you feel really safe. You feel that nothing changes. So when you are walking down the streets in Moscow, the only change you can see that there are some posters who asking you to volunteer for the really big money to the war. This is all changes you can see in Moscow. The shops are full. Shopping centers are full. There is zero free space in the shopping center. So everything is full.
In the city centers, I know in Ukraine, because I was there in Ukraine this summer, there are memorials to who has died. For example, the city where I went to, Ternopil, there was display with a photograph of each of the soldiers who've been killed so far. And in that city, there's about 200, kind of A1 newspaper, a broadsheet newspaper size picture in the town centre to remember each soldier. Is there memorials to people who've already died so far, or are casualties hidden from the public view?
The Russian government try to do their best to prevent any thoughts in Russian people of the war. So they try to reduce presence of the war in everyday life. And I can say when I come back to Moscow, I forget about war much more than I can forget it here in Ireland. Because here in Ireland, when I walk down the street, sometimes from time to time, I see Ukrainian flags, so I remember about Ukraine. Sometimes on radio, I can hear something about Ukraine. But when you are, have your day in Moscow, all posters are about upcoming events, festivals, or something new, or travel to Tula. So kind of, and only some small posters asking to volunteer. So they try to reduce it as much as possible.
That's very interesting. I suppose next week it's the United States election, and I'm wondering, is that what both Vladimir Zelensky and Vladimir Putin are banking on? Is that what people are thinking, or what's your perspective on the US election? How important is that to this conflict?
I think that it is important, but I don't think that it is kind of this straight way. But because when Trump was the president last time, he even created kind of sanctions against Russia. So during his presidency, it was some new sanctions. So I don't really think, and I don't really feel that he's kind of friend, for Russia. I don't feel so. And right now, when I'm speaking with the people and also speaking with some people who are working in Russian media as well, nobody knows everything, anything, because, American elections, of course, are very important. But for Russia, the most important thing, will it be a high inflation? So will it be some problems with China? So this is, how will US regulator work in a kind of countries like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and kind of these countries? Because will they push to these post-Soviet countries not to work with Russia, or will they not push? So these things are more important to Russia than US elections right now. I feel so. So of course people are trying to understand what will be next, but.
And do you think this war will just keep going on, or do you think there might be a break in the situation?
I think what I feel at the moment, that Russia can continue for some time at least. I really believe in that. I have many reasons to believe in it. And for Russian regime, this war is very comfortable, because they can, with this war, they say, oh, now we are in a situation of war, so we are doing many things and nobody can ask any questions because now it is war. So kind of this situation. So, and these sanctions, oh, how comfortable are there? Sanctions who are, especially regulations who prevent any withdrawal of Russian money from Russia. This is amazing. So even if you are, opposition person and you decide to sell all your property in Russia, grab money and, start new life, you can't do this. You can't do this because bank in Ireland, any bank in Ireland, when they see a big amount of money from Russia, they just block your account without questions. Even if you provide all the information that this is your property, kind of. So it helps Russia, so flats in Russia are still have very high price because nobody's selling, so if there will be another situation, everybody starts to sell and, property goes down.
What do you think could be done to make them feel uncomfortable about this war?
So the first thing is to, unbalance Putin system. So right now, when somebody say, oh, we will send Russia to the Stone Age. No, you will never send Russia to the Stone Age unless all businesses are still working inside the country. And even so, even if some businessmen are strong enough and ready enough to try, to close their business in Russia because they don't want to pay taxes in Russia, because they don't want to pay taxes to the war. And I know such a businessman, and not one or two people. But it is very difficult to open business if you are a Russian citizen anywhere else. In Europe, in United States.
What should Western governments do?
So I think Western government can say, if you are a Russian businessman and you have business in Russia, close business in Russia, and come here and open business here, we will provide you such an opportunity. And if people will start to close their business in Russia, I think it will really, really change the situation. Because this is the workplaces. This is, they are paying taxes. Yes, of course, oil and gas are important, but it is not even 50% of Russian budget. Most of the Russian budget is taxes by individuals and companies. And government and Western government do anything to prevent, Russian businessmen to change the side.
You said about the activities of Free Russians Ireland, the protests, the letter writing to prisoners, and you tried to get some influence to politicians in Ireland to take a position. What do you think the Irish politicians should do or say about this current conflict and Russia and its people as well?
So first of all, I think the first thing that they want to repeat that they are against Putin, not against Russia. They are trying to say so, not an Irish politicians, but politicians in Germany. So they are trying to do that. But sanctions that they are doing are against Russian citizens, not against Russian government. At the end of the day. And Irish politicians are in a really good situation. So Ireland is neutral and not in a NATO and, and still it is, this country is a part of European Union. So Ireland can be, voice of another point of view. So Ireland can make a suggestion of new strategy, because it is obviously that strategy that have been implemented are not working. So Russia is still, doing what, is still moving on a Ukrainian territory. So those strategy who was used before are not as resultive as they can be. And if we look at the Russian budget at the moment, a new Russian budget for the upcoming year, what can we say? Yeah, Russian government had less money. And did they stop to spend for war? No, they increased spent on war. They decreased spend of the health, childcare, and this kind of thing. So these sanctions, about oil and so on, it prevents Russian children to get some health services or some education, not to Russian soldiers fight in Ukraine. So it is reality, and we must understand this reality before doing something else.
Olga, you've given me some very interesting insights, and so I'm sure some people's perspectives will be quite challenged by what you've said. I'd like to thank you very much sincerely for joining me on this podcast. I wish you well in your life in Santry, and
thank you so much.
And your business and your activities protesting against the war and anything that will bring an end to it and allow Ukraine to recover and from this disastrous invasion. It's I think many people have just been horrified but bewildered by it, and you've given us some insights into the feelings and thinkings of people in Russia and who have left Russia.
Very interesting perspectives from Olga. For example, the story about the Russia becoming more free when they're defeated in war after the Crimean War, when serfs won a lot more rights, and Russia becoming more autocratic after victory, for example, after the Second World War and after the defeat of Napoleon in 1812. Also, the question about Russian support for the war. Don't take those surveys too seriously that you see reported every now and again in Western press, because most people refused to take part in surveys. I think this podcast just scratched at the surface of the issues, but I hope you found it interesting. And you can find out more about the Free Russians Ireland group and about their activities. I've put some links on the article on m1.radio.ie. Stay with us for episodes coming up, where we'll be looking at topics of interest for those of you who are up and down and in and around the M1. I'm Garrett Mullen, and this is the M1 podcast, and thank you to David West for sound and editing.